Welcome to Reddit Revenge Stories. Did you know over 90% of our viewers don't subscribe? If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and hit that like button. We're targeting 500 likes on this one. Let's dive into today's tale. I always thought marriage was supposed to be the safest place in a man's life. The one shelter where, no matter how stormy the world outside got, he could retreat and find peace. That was what I believed when I married Emily. We had been together for 6 years, married for 4, and in all that time, I thought we were solid. I wasn't the perfect husband, but I was loyal. I was devoted. I built my life around her. Turns out, while I was busy laying bricks, she was already setting fire to the foundation. We met in college. I was the quiet guy with the big plans, always thinking 10 years ahead, trying to turn dreams into something tangible. She was the free-spirited, warm-hearted girl who seemed to light up every room she entered. She was kind, always laughing, always making people feel seen. I was drawn to that. In fact, I was probably drawn to her because she wasn't like me. And for a while, it worked. We balanced each other. She helped me loosen up. I helped her get grounded. When we got married, it was a small ceremony. Close friends, family, nothing too fancy. We didn't have much, but we had love, and at the time, that felt like enough. I remember holding her hands at the altar and promising to be her partner in everything. I meant it, and I really thought she did too. Our early married life wasn't glamorous. We were both working long hours, me in a tech firm, her as a freelance graphic designer. Money was tight, stress was constant, but we made it work. We had a rhythm. We'd cook dinner together, binge watch shows on weekends, talk about dreams of buying a home, maybe having a kid one day. I genuinely believed we were building something lasting. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. They weren't obvious, at least not at first. Emily started working longer hours on her projects. She said she'd landed some major contracts that required her to travel occasionally. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She'd never given me a reason not to. When she said she had to go to Portland for a weekend workshop, I helped her pack. When she said she was staying late at her studio, I brought her dinner. When she seemed distant, I chalked it up to stress. It wasn't until one night about 8 months ago that things started to shift. She was asleep, and her phone buzzed around midnight. I wasn't trying to snoop. I just reached over to silence it, thinking it might be her mom or one of her friends. But the name that flashed on the screen stopped me cold. Jay from agency. Jay. She'd never mentioned him before. I didn't open the message. I didn't want to be that guy. I put the phone down and convinced myself I was overthinking. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the way my stomach turned when I saw that name. So I started paying more attention, not snooping, just observing. That's how it begins, right? The unraveling. It doesn't start with fireworks or confrontations. It starts in silence, in the way you start noticing too much. Her patterns changed. She guarded her phone like it was a diary. She started dressing differently, not just better, but more deliberate, like she was dressing for someone. She laughed more when she texted. She smiled at her screen in a way I hadn't seen in a while. She also started picking fights over small things, things we used to shrug off. At first I blamed myself. Maybe I'd become boring. Maybe I was too absorbed in work. Maybe she needed more attention. So I tried. I took her out on spontaneous dates. I planned a weekend getaway. I even wrote her a letter like we used to in college. She appreciated it, sure, but the distance remained. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. She said she was heading to a client meeting that might run late. I decided to surprise her. I picked up her favorite takeout, stopped by her studio with the idea of waiting for her to return, and maybe sharing a quiet dinner together. But when I got there, the lights were off. Her car wasn't outside. I called her, no answer. I waited for an hour. When she finally called back, she said she'd gotten stuck in a meeting and had to go straight to another client's office. She sounded breathless, distracted. I wanted to believe her, but something in her voice told me not to. So I did something I never thought I'd do. The next day, I took time off work. I told her I had an all-day meeting and wouldn't be home until late. Then I followed her. I felt like an idiot doing it, like some character in a bad soap opera. But deep down, I already knew. I just needed the truth to punch me in the face before I could admit it. She drove across town, parked outside a loft-style building, and walked in like she'd done it 1,000 times. I waited. 2 hours later, she came out. With him. Jay. I didn't know who he was, but I recognized him from one of her old Instagram posts. Just a colleague, she'd said back then. They were laughing, arms around each other, looking like a couple who'd been together. Forever. They kissed. Not a peck, not a friendly goodbye, but the kind of kiss that's full of familiarity. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't confront her that night. I went home. I sat in the dark and thought about every moment we'd shared, every promise she made. I felt hollow. Betrayed doesn't even begin to cover it. I felt like I'd been living in a painting and someone had just torn through the canvas to show me it was all a fake. Over the next few days, I pretended nothing was wrong. I needed time to think. I needed to plan. If there's one thing I've always been good at, it's strategy. And this wasn't going to be a screaming match. It wasn't going to be a teary, emotional breakdown. Number, I wasn't going to let her destroy my life and walk away unscathed. If she wanted to cheat, she could. But she'd learn that every choice has a cost. I started gathering evidence, not just photos, but text records, receipts, travel logs, everything I could quietly access. I hired a private investigator to fill in the blanks. Turns out this wasn't some impulsive fling. It had been going on for over a year. They'd traveled together, stayed in hotels, even attended conferences under the pretense of work. I found out who Jay really was. Not just a creative director, but someone trying to launch his own design firm, and using Emily's skills and possibly even my money to do it. She'd been dipping into our joint account, just small withdrawals masked as expenses. I never noticed. It was sickening. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once the shock wears off, all that's left is clarity. And I was crystal clear on one thing. She was going to pay. Not in violence, not in public humiliation, but in precision. I wanted to dismantle her lies the way she dismantled our vows, piece by piece. So I smiled at her over dinner. I kissed her forehead before bed. I asked about her projects with curiosity. And all the while, I was laying the groundwork. Step 1 was patience. Step 2, exposure. In the weeks that followed, I became an actor in my own life. I played the part of the loving, oblivious husband so convincingly that even I started to forget what was real sometimes. It wasn't easy. Every time she looked me in the eye and lied, something inside me hardened. But I knew I had to be patient. The more comfortable she felt, the more careless she'd become. And the more careless she became, the more power I would have when the time came to destroy everything she thought was secure. I'd already gathered enough evidence to confront her, but confrontation wasn't the goal. Revenge was. And for it to be effective, it needed to hit her where it hurt most. Not just emotionally, but financially, socially, and professionally. I wanted her to feel what it was like to watch the world you built collapse around you, while the person you trusted smiled and walked away. First, I met with a divorce attorney. Quietly, carefully. I didn't want any records popping up in our shared mailbox. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about preparing the trap. My lawyer was meticulous. We reviewed all joint accounts, property deeds, insurance documents, retirement funds. I learned things I'd never paid attention to before, like how Emily had been gradually transferring money into a private savings account for months. She probably thought she was being smart, thought she was securing a life with Jay while I remained in the dark. What she didn't realize was that the bank statements she was trying to hide were now in my possession. I had printed copies, screenshots, even surveillance footage showing her making cash deposits into that account. She wasn't just cheating, she was embezzling from our shared finances. And that's a legal issue. Next, I focused on her work life. She'd always taken pride in being an independent designer. Her portfolio was impressive and she had a decent client base. But I found out that Jay had been using her work to pitch his own brand without crediting her. They were building something together. On paper, it looked like a partnership. But in reality, she was the one doing the heavy lifting while he soaked up the benefits. So I started collecting contracts. I reached out to one of her clients, pretending to be an investor interested in Jay's firm. The client mentioned a pitch deck that included several of Emily's designs. designs she never knew were shared. I took that as another piece of evidence. She was being used, betrayed by the very man she was betraying me for. It was almost poetic. I didn't stop there. I built a dossier, names, dates, emails, call logs, photos, screenshots, everything. I backed it up in multiple places, both physical and digital. If anything ever happened to me, I wanted people to know the truth. But more importantly, I wanted to be ready for the final move. While I was plotting my strategy, I made sure to keep up the act. I complimented her cooking, I brought her flowers, I asked her about her projects, pretending to be supportive. She smiled more now, probably thinking I was the perfect fool. That made it easier. Her false sense of security gave me time to finish what I started. Then came the perfect opportunity. Our anniversary was approaching. 4 years of marriage. I suggested we throw a small party, just a few close friends, some family, a simple celebration. She was surprised, but she agreed. I knew she would. She probably thought it was my way of trying to save the marriage. That's how detached from reality she was. I planned everything: the food, the decor, the guest list, and, most importantly, the guest of honor, Jay. I invited him without telling her, sent a message from a fake business account he'd be interested in. I knew he wouldn't resist. The lure of a new client, especially one with money, was too tempting for someone like him. The day of the party, everything was perfect. Emily wore the dress I bought her the year before. She looked beautiful, glowing even, probably thinking about the lies she'd whispered to him after everyone left. But I had other plans. The guests arrived. Laughter, drinks, music. I moved through the room, greeting people, shaking hands, playing host. When Jay walked in, I saw the moment their eyes met. She froze, just for a second. Then she smiled. He looked confused at first, then relaxed, arrogant, confident. He didn't recognize me as a threat. That was his mistake. We made it through the appetizers, small talk, and polite laughter. Then I tapped my glass. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I said, raising my glass. 4 years ago, I married the love of my life. Emily has been my partner, my inspiration, and my home. So tonight, I just want to celebrate her. People clapped. She blushed. Jay sipped his drink. But, I continued, there's something else I want to share. Something I think all of you deserve to know. Especially those of you who've supported us as a couple. I clicked a remote. The projector I had set up earlier whirred to life. The room darkened. The screen lit up. At first it was innocent. Photos of our wedding, vacation, sweet moments. Then it shifted. Photos of her and Jay, hotel receipts, messages, audio clips. Silence fell over the room. You could feel it. Confusion turning into realization, then shock. Emily stood frozen. Jay's face went pale. I didn't want to believe it, I said calmly. But the truth has a way of coming out. This isn't just about infidelity. This is about betrayal, of trust, of marriage, and of decency. And I think everyone here deserves to see who they really are. I ended the presentation and walked out of the room. People didn't say much. Some followed me. Others just stared at her. It was chaos. I didn't look back. That night, she came home crying, begging, denying at first, then admitting, then blaming me. I said nothing. I just handed her an envelope, the divorce papers, and a summary of the financial damages she would be liable for. I told her she had 3 days to leave the house. I'd already had the locks changed and secured the accounts. She had no access to our money, no legal leg to stand on. She tried to fight it, said she deserved a second chance, claimed Jay had manipulated her, but it was too late. My revenge wasn't just public. It was surgical. She lost clients, friends, her reputation. And as for Jay, I sent his firm a legal notice for intellectual property theft, backed by the evidence I'd gathered. His startup never launched. But I wasn't done yet. After the chaos of the anniversary night settled, I found myself sitting alone in our living room, my living room now, where pictures of a life once lived still hung on the walls. But I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel the emptiness people warned me about when they talked about divorce. I felt clarity, peace even, because I knew I had done everything with precision. I hadn't just exposed a lie, I had dismantled it, brick by brick, in front of an audience that mattered to her. And now, the final pieces of my plan were coming together. Emily had moved out. Not quietly, of course. She tried to stall. She cried. She threatened legal action, but once her own lawyer reviewed the case, he told her exactly what I already knew. She had no leverage. She had committed financial fraud within the marriage, and there was evidence, clear, time-stamped, undeniable. The court would side with me. And they did. In the final divorce settlement, she walked away with none of the house, none of the shared savings, and a minimal monthly allowance until she found new employment. The judge saw through the facade she tried to put on in court. I wasn't spiteful. I was calm, collected, respectful. That always plays well under the robe. Jay, on the other hand, was crumbling faster than I anticipated. The cease and desist notice I had delivered to his business partners sent a ripple through his small network. The designs he had used, Emily's, designs were proven to be plagiarized. Once I forwarded the evidence to the companies he was trying to work with, his deals fell apart. His name went from an up-and-coming entrepreneur to an untrustworthy fraud in a matter of weeks. The cherry on top? His own brother, a quiet, successful guy I barely knew, called me and thanked me. Apparently, Jay had a long history of cutting corners, using people, and betraying trust. His family had turned a blind eye for years, but now, with everything out in the open, even they couldn't defend him. He was out, isolated, a liar whose mask had finally cracked for everyone to see. But revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about renewal, about rebuilding from the ruins with purpose. So I shifted my focus from them to me. I left my job. It wasn't out of necessity, it was out of desire. I needed a fresh start. I took a short sabbatical, traveled alone for the first time in years. I hiked in Utah, I sat by the ocean in Oregon. I didn't rush it. I allowed myself to grieve, not for the loss of the marriage, but for the man I had been. The man who trusted too blindly, who loved too naively, and when I returned, I started my own firm. I knew I had the skills. I had the contacts, but now I had the drive that only comes from surviving betrayal. It wasn't about making money, it was about making meaning. My firm grew faster than I expected. I hired a small team, each person handpicked not just for skill, but for integrity. We built something solid, together. One afternoon, about 9 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Emily. Her voice was shaky, polite even. She said she was sorry for how everything ended, that she had made mistakes, that she had been lost. She wasn't calling to beg, she knew better. But I think she wanted closure, or maybe forgiveness. She told me Jay had left her, took what little money she had left and disappeared to another state. She was staying with a cousin now, trying to find work. Most of her old clients had dropped her after the scandal. She was starting over, alone. I didn't say much, just listened. Then she asked almost in a whisper, "Do you ever think it could have ended differently?" I thought about that for a moment. I really did. "Sure," I said. "If you had chosen honesty over secrecy, if you had come to me and told me the truth before it spiraled, if you hadn't lied every day to my face while planning a future with someone else, if any of those things had happened, it might have ended differently, but they didn't. And now we both live with that." There was a pause. "I just wanted you to know I regret it all," she said. "I hope you find peace," I told her. And I meant it. Then I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. Some people say revenge is a fire that consumes the person who holds it. Maybe that's true when it's impulsive, cruel, or out of control. But mine wasn't. Mine was methodical, honest, just. I didn't strike back to hurt. I struck back to reveal, to protect, and to rebuild. And in the process, I became someone I could be proud of. Months passed, then a year. One day, I found myself at a coffee shop, reading a book when a woman sat down at the table next to mine. We exchanged polite glances, then a smile. Eventually, we talked. Her name was Rachel. She was kind, witty, smart. Divorced, too, with her own stories of betrayal and resilience. We didn't rush anything. But for the first time, I didn't feel guarded. I felt open. I felt ready. We went on a walk that day, just around the block. We talked about books, about places we wanted to visit, about the kind of life we each imagined. There was no performance, no masks, just two people, quietly rebuilding, separately and together. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Rachel and I will end up together forever, but I do know this. I will never again allow someone to make me feel small inside my own life. I will never again let loyalty blind me to lies, and I will never regret standing up for myself with quiet strength and thoughtful revenge. Because in the end, I didn't just survive the betrayal, I rewrote the ending. And this time, I wrote it for me.